The first thing they noticed was her shoes. Practical. Flat-soled. Unfashionable. The kind worn by someone who walked more than they were driven. A woman in her 70s stood at the edge of the gleaming kitchen, her silver hair tied neatly at the nape, wearing a plain white blouse and slacks. She held a small leather folder against her side and waited without interrupting. In a room sharpened by noise and knives, her stillness felt misplaced. Out of place. Uninvited. Chef Renaud didn't look up right away. He was barking instructions in rapid French, gesturing toward the line as two sauciers scrambled to salvage a broken reduction. When he finally turned and saw her, his expression barely shifted. The Frenchman, tall and lean, with silver-streaked black hair and precision in every gesture, raised an eyebrow like one might upon discovering dust on crystal.
Madame,
he said, the syllables clipped. The woman stepped forward with a quiet grace. Good evening. I'm M. Johnson. I was told you were looking for extra prep help for the European delegation dinner. Renaud blinked once, slowly. Then his eyes scanned her from head to toe, the way a sommelier might judge a bottle with no label. We are preparing for the most critical event of the quarter, he said. You believe now is the time for applications? A few sous chefs nearby paused their chopping to glance over. One of them, a young man with sleeves rolled too high, smirked and whispered to his colleague, "She thinks we need someone to scrub pans." The woman didn't flinch. She opened her folder, revealing a single-page resume. It was printed in Times New Roman. No logos, no chef awards, no television appearances. Renaud took it like it might burn him and scanned the page. His nostrils flared. "You're not even classically trained," he said. She replied calmly, "I've worked in kitchens before."
I'm adaptable.
He held her gaze for a second too long. Then he turned to the kitchen staff, now clearly eavesdropping. He let the moment hang like smoke. "You want to work in my kitchen?" he said, voice rising. "Very well. You see that?" He jabbed a finger at the slate menu on the wall. The chalk read in looping script, Canada à l'Orange 7 p.m. seating, Ambassador's Table Star. "Make it," he said. "You have 1 hour. No questions. If it's edible, you can stay. If not," he shrugged, "you can return to whatever community center you wandered out of." Laughter broke across the kitchen like cutlery dropped on tile. The young sous chef didn't even try to hide his snort. Another muttered, "This'll be fun to watch." The woman, M. Johnson, didn't smile. She stepped forward, rolled up the sleeves of her blouse with deliberate care, and tied the waist of her apron. "Where's your recipe?" she asked. Renaud smirked. "If you need one, madam, you have already failed." She nodded once, gently, then walked to the prep station without another word. The room watched her move with a peculiar silence. Something about the way she laid out the cutting board. The way her hands hovered over the duck breast, not touching it yet, just sensing its weight. She didn't fumble. She didn't hesitate. But she also didn't posture. She simply began. Renaud turned and waved a hand as if to dismiss the scene entirely. "She will burn it before she scores the skin," he said. But one person, a young woman named Anna, sous chef in training, kept watching. Her eyes narrowed not with mockery, but something else. Curiosity. There was something off about this woman. Not in how she looked, but in how she carried stillness in a room that thrived on chaos. A question hung in the kitchen now. Unspoken, but shared. Who was this woman? And why did she seem like she'd been here before? The hiss of duck skin meeting hot steel filled the kitchen like the opening chord of a symphony. Maye didn't flinch. She tilted the pan slightly, letting the rendered fat collect, her eyes steady, distant, like she wasn't just cooking, but remembering. Long before this kitchen, before New York and the laughter of boys in starched aprons, there had been the sky. Endless blue over red dust. The steady hum of a single-engine plane cutting through air thick with heat and silence. She had been 9, strapped into the co-pilot seat of a weather-beaten aircraft, legs too short to reach the floor. Her father's hands gripped the controls while her mother studied a faded topographic map, its edges frayed and stained from years of sun and sweat. They were searching for something that had been lost for centuries, a missing corridor of the Kalahari Desert. But to Maye, The map was less about geography and more about grit. When the fuel gauge dipped and the radio gave only static, her father had glanced at her, his voice calm. "If we don't find the path," he said, "we draw one of our own." That became the first lesson she learned about silence. That it was not always a void. Sometimes, silence was full of patience, of certainty, of power. In the present, the kitchen remained noisy around her. Renaud paced behind the line like a general preparing for battle. Anna, still pretending to chop shallots, kept watching Maye from the corner of her eye. But Maye moved within her own stillness. She flipped the duck with a practiced motion. The skin had crisped to the color of dark amber, its surface bubbling just slightly, a sign of perfect heat control. She leaned in, inhaled gently, then reached for a sliver of orange peel. In another life, years after the desert, she had stood barefoot in a freezing apartment in Toronto. It was winter. The windows leaked wind like broken seals. Her fingers were numb, her breath fogged in the air. On the floor lay a single mattress with 3 children bundled together, cocooned in whatever blankets she could find. There had been no furniture, no dining table, no stovetop that worked properly. Just an electric kettle, a chipped pot, and a single orange someone had given her at a street market 2 days earlier. She remembered peeling that orange in silence, saving the rind, boiling water and starch together to make something warm. The scent of citrus had filled the room like defiance. Her middle son had asked, "What is it?" She answered, "French soup. Special recipe." He laughed. So did the others. They ate it without complaint. She watched them sleep later, cheek to cheek, and promised herself that no matter how little they had, they would never go hungry. Back in the kitchen at Verita's, Maye stirred the pan, letting the fat carry the orange zest into the sauce base. She added nothing artificial. No shortcut. Just memory. Just purpose. Renaud passed behind her and scoffed. "You're still on sauce," he said, loud enough for others to hear. "You realize the meat rests for 15. Not an hour." Maye didn't answer. She didn't need to. Anna narrowed her eyes now, the faintest frown pulling at her brow. Something was wrong. Or rather, something didn't fit. The woman worked too cleanly. Too precisely. Not like someone making guesses. Like someone who had done this before. Thousands of times. The rest of the kitchen had gone back to its rhythm. Clanging pans, fast footsteps, the occasional curse in French or Italian. But around Maye's station, there was a subtle shift in temperature. A pause. A perimeter of quiet curiosity. She plated the duck on a tray, not yet finished, not yet dressed, and reached for a small pot of vinegar she had steeped with cloves and burnt sugar. Not part of the written recipe. But then again, Renaud hadn't given her one. She moved with care, as if each motion were being archived. Which, in a way, they were. These were not just gestures of technique. They were signatures. Woven over decades. Etched into nerve and memory. One didn't forget how to breathe. Nor did she forget this. Anna leaned slightly closer. "Where did you train?" she asked quietly. Maye glanced up. Her eyes were steady, not sharp. There was no pride in them, no deflection. Only truth. "I trained where silence teaches more than shouting," she said. "And where burning something meant no one ate." Then she turned back to the sauce, as though the question had been a gust of wind brushing past her, nothing more. Renaud returned with a clipboard in one hand and a smirk already blooming on his face. He set a small index card beside Maye's cutting board like a judge handing down a sentence. The card was handwritten, hastily, in narrow lines, and speckled with kitchen grease. It looked official enough, until you read it. "The house version," he said with mock generosity. "Since you insisted on working from memory." Maye picked it up. Her eyes scanned quickly. She said nothing, but Anna, still chopping on a nearby station, saw the faint narrowing of her gaze. The recipe was wrong. The duck sear time was 5 minutes too short. There was no mention of resting the meat after roasting. The sauce, famously delicate, was reduced only by heat, with no acidic lift. And worst of all, the most essential ingredient for that depth, the soul of the orange glaze, was missing, no Grand Marnier. Not even Culinary. Just white sugar, orange juice concentrate, and cornstarch. Anna glanced over Maye's shoulder. Her mouth tightened. He gave you the base-level version, she whispered. This is what he hands in turns. He's setting you up. Maye looked at the card again, then back at the duck already half prepared. She folded the card once, neatly, and tucked it under the salt dish. It's fine, she said softly. No, it's not, Anna whispered, more urgent now. 2 people quit because of this dish. He waits until you're halfway through, then humiliates you in front of the full staff. Maye was already slicing orange peel, her blade moving in slow, elegant arcs. The zest curled into delicate threads, finer than anything from a microplane. Her hands were calm, her face unreadable. He likes the performance, Anna continued. He doesn't want a dish. He wants a failure. Maye smiled, just slightly. I once made this dish, she said, almost to herself, when I had nothing but a bruised orange and a dented pot. My children thought it was the best meal they'd ever had. Anna didn't speak after that. She just stepped back and watched. All around them, the kitchen moved like a clock wound too tightly. The commis rotated out fresh herbs. Stockpots hissed on the back burners. Pans banged, flames rose, timers buzzed. And in the middle of it all, Maye worked in a pocket of stillness, quiet as breath. She checked the duck, gently pressed the skin, listened to the crackle. Not loud, not aggressive, just right. Renaud passed again. You haven't scored it properly, he announced, voice ringing. That will never crisp. Maye didn't respond. She adjusted the pan, angled it to collect the rendered fat, and added a clove without looking up. He paused, then moved on, clearly annoyed. Anna approached again, handing her a ramekin. We had some Grand Marnier in dry storage. I brought it. Maye shook her head. If it's not in the house recipe, she said quietly, I'll find another way. She turned toward the reduction. The base was already shimmering, dark orange, flecked with bits of caramelized zest. She added a splash of white wine vinegar and a twist of peppercorn, watching it hiss, lift, then settle. It wasn't traditional, but it would work. 2 more cooks paused under the guise of collecting garnish. They watched her hands, the way she stirred with a spoon held like a pen. There was no rush, but there was no uncertainty either. Renaud circled back once more, now with 2 junior chefs trailing him like satellites. You're deviating from the technique, he said flatly. Which technique? Maye asked softly. The one written on the card, or the one you used when you impressed the delegation from Lyon? He blinked. Excuse me. Maye didn't repeat herself. She just turned back to her station. He hovered longer this time, uncertain. Watching. Waiting for her to flinch. When she didn't, he stepped away, but slower now. Anna leaned close again, voice low. Who are you? Maye kept slicing, not looking up. Someone who's had to cook to survive, she answered. Not to impress. Then, almost inaudibly, she added, survival teaches you precision. No do-overs when mouths are waiting. By now the scent from her station was drawing attention. It didn't smell like the kitchen's usual rotation of butter, meat, and herb. It smelled layered, bright, deep, like something familiar, but unplaceable. Nostalgic, even to those who had never tasted it. Maye pulled the duck from the pan, set it gently on the resting rack, and turned to finish the sauce. She added a single cube of frozen veal demi-glace from her prep drawer, reduced it, then added orange peel and a whisper of burnt honey. One of the senior line cooks stepped closer, faking a stretch, then stopped mid-motion. He whispered to his partner, "That's not how Chef Renaud does it." His partner replied, "No. But it smells better." At that, the first-line cook tilted his head, eyes narrowing. "I think I've smelled this before. Cape Savannah. Years ago." "It's not possible," but he trailed off. Because Maye Musk wasn't finished yet. Maye removed the duck breast from its resting rack with the care of someone handling glass. Her fingers pressed lightly along the skin, testing the tension. Then she reached for a small copper weight from her kit, nothing fancy, worn smooth with use. She wrapped the duck in parchment and set it between two heated steel plates, aligning it with exactness. The action was strange, unfamiliar to most of the kitchen, and quiet murmurs began to pass between the stations. Anna, closest, leaned forward with furrowed brows. At first she said nothing, only watched the process. Maye rotated the duck once, turned a knob on the heat plate to low, and waited. It wasn't a press. It wasn't a confit. It wasn't anything Anna had seen outside of obscure French literature. "You're compressing it," Anna whispered, realization blooming in her voice. Maye nodded, almost imperceptibly. "Compression lent a sec," Anna said aloud, barely believing herself. From Le Grand's manual. 1974. A prep cook nearby turned his head. "What is that?" "It's a dry, slow-pressing technique," Anna explained, eyes never leaving the duck. "It renders the fat without breaking the skin. Layers the juices under the crisp like a cushion. No one uses it anymore. It's lost." The whispers traveled like static down a line of open flames and boiling stock. Renaud heard the shift in tone and turned sharply toward Maye's station. The copper weight came off. The parchment unwrapped. And there it was, the skin, now dry to the touch but not broken, glowing amber gold like lacquered wood, with not a single bubble, no warping, no seeping. A perfect compression. Renaud frowned. Not at the dish. At the silence. Maye moved to her sauce reduction next. She lit a long-handled burner, not with a match, but with a slender strip of aromatic wood, sandalwood or maybe something older. The flame took slowly, releasing a scent the kitchen wasn't prepared for. She tossed in a pinch of coarse brown sea salt, followed by a sliver of orange bark, and lowered the saucepan onto the flame. The caramel began to bloom not with sugar but with time. Her eyes watched the change like a doctor reading vitals. Anna stepped back slightly, her voice shaking. "She's not just skilled," she murmured. She's doing this like it's muscle memory." The kitchen's rhythm began to slow, unconsciously, pulled into the quiet orbit of that small station. One by one, knives paused. Water boiled without being stirred. Even Renaud, now circling like a hawk, stopped 2 feet away and said nothing. The last step before plating, Maye reached for a small vial from her pocket. Inside, a tincture of dried citrus oils and clove infusion. She added only a single drop to the sauce. Not stirred. Just swirled gently by wrist motion alone. Anna whispered again. "That's not even in production kitchens anymore. It's something you'd find in Cape Savannah." The name dropped like a coin on tile. Someone behind the grill line straightened. Another turned, eyes wide. Renaud heard it. He turned to the young cook who'd repeated it. "What did you say?" The cook stammered. "Nothing, chef. Just, it reminded me of a tasting menu I saw once. Years ago. My uncle, he went to South Africa. Cape Savannah. Said it was like eating poetry." Renaud's eyes narrowed. He turned back toward Maye with sharp suspicion. Meanwhile, another line cook quietly pulled out his phone, hiding it under the countertop. He typed quickly. M. Johnson Veritas French Duck New York. Nothing came up. Then he tried again. Cape Savannah.
Duck à l'orange.
Michelin. A pause. And then a name appeared. Chef Maye Musk. Cape Savannah. Johannesburg. 3 Michelin stars. 1992. A grainy photo loaded, faded with age, but unmistakable. The same eyes. The same set of the mouth. A younger face, framed in white chef's linen, holding a plate that looked almost identical to the one now resting quietly at Station 4. The cook showed it to the colleague beside him. Neither said a word. The screen passed, hand to hand, station to station, until it landed in Anna's palm. Her breath caught. She looked up at Maye, then back at the screen. It was her. Without a doubt. Anna raised her head slowly. Her voice came out in barely a whisper. "You're her." Maye didn't respond. She simply arranged the duck on a warm porcelain plate, spooned the reduction over it in a perfect oval, and placed 3 segments of blood orange along the side like punctuation marks. Renaud was now standing inches away, arms folded. "What exactly is it you're doing in my kitchen?" he asked, low and tight. Maye glanced at him, expression unreadable. "I was just following your instructions," she said gently. "To cook." No one laughed this time. The room had fallen silent, not out of obedience, but awe. Everything else in the kitchen, the timers, the steam, the clatter, sounded distant now. As if all of it had shifted to background for something more important. Something rare. Something they hadn't known they'd been waiting for. Renaud looked down at the plate. Then at Maye. Then, for just a moment, at his own reflection in the chrome of her still pan. Something in him cracked. But he said nothing. Because there was nothing left to say. The plate left the pass under a silver dome, carried with reverence by the senior server whose hands, though steady, betrayed a strange tension. The duck glistened beneath the cloche, its skin taut and golden, glazed so perfectly it looked almost lacquered. The sauce shimmered against the porcelain, catching the light like polished amber. It was a dish that breathed its own gravity. In the dining room, everything was crisp white linens and hushed conversation, until the dome lifted. The ambassador from the Paris Culinary Committee leaned forward. A man in his 60s, elegant in posture, with the air of someone who had eaten in every major capital. His companions, equally refined, leaned in slightly as he raised his fork and knife. He sliced through the duck breast with slow precision. The skin gave way with a whisper of resistance, revealing a deep rose center. Juices pooled beneath, but did not run. He took the first bite. Then he stopped chewing. No one spoke. The man sat still, eyes closed. He chewed once more, slowly. His jaw stilled. A breath escaped, but not from habit, from memory. When he opened his eyes, they were wet. He turned toward the dining room manager, who had been standing nearby with practiced detachment. "This," he said softly, "this is impossible." "Sir?" the manager asked, alarmed. "I ate this dish," the ambassador continued, 30 years ago. In Johannesburg. Cape Savannah. A place so ahead of its time they said it was hallucination on a plate. The chef, she disappeared. He glanced around. No one has cooked this way since. Back in the kitchen, Renaud was staring blankly at the empty station. The plate was gone. But the scent still lingered, defiant and undeniable. He turned to Maye. "Who are you?" he asked, but the words came out cracked, like splintered porcelain. Maye didn't look at him right away. She was wiping down her station. Cleaning as if it mattered, as if she had not just undone the myth of his kitchen in under an hour. When she finally looked up, her voice was low, steady. "I once had a restaurant," she said. "And 3 children to feed." That was all. But it landed like thunder. The staff stilled again. Even Anna, who had been holding her breath, looked frozen between awe and disbelief. Then the dining room manager burst through the swinging doors, breathless. "They're asking for the chef," he said, eyes scanning wildly. "The committee wants to meet the one who made the duck." No one moved. The silence stretched. Maye was drying her hands on a cloth napkin when another voice broke through the stillness. It came from the far end of the kitchen, almost a squeak. "Oh my God," said one of the younger prep cooks, staring at his phone. She's Maye Musk." A second voice jumped in. "As in Elon Musk's mother." Someone laughed under their breath, half in disbelief. Another said, wait, she's the one from that photo. The chef in the black and white cover from Culinary Vanguard. I thought she died." Maye said nothing. The recognition, once begun, moved like a wave, unstoppable, undeniable. Staff huddled around glowing screens, pulling up faded articles, old menu scans, reviews that read like poetry. A legendary duck à l'orange. An all-woman kitchen staff in the early 90s. A South African chef who walked away from Michelin stardom without explanation. And now, here she was. In flat shoes and a plain blouse. Quiet. Composed. Tying her apron with the same hands that once held 3 stars and a collapsing roof over her head. Renaud's face had lost color. "You," he started, then stopped. His throat worked. "Why here?" Why now? Maye folded the cloth slowly and set it aside. Because sometimes, she said gently, you need to remember why you started cooking. And who you cooked for. Renaud opened his mouth again, but the words failed him. The manager stepped forward once more, this time almost pleading. Chef Musk, please. They're requesting you personally. The James Beard representative is asking if you'll join the table. Maye hesitated, just briefly. Then she nodded once. But as she began walking toward the dining room, she paused beside Anna. Their eyes met. I'm not here to take anything from anyone, Maye said softly. Just to remind you what's possible when heart outweighs ego. Anna said nothing, but her throat tightened, and she looked down, blinking hard. Maye passed through the kitchen doors and vanished into the quiet buzz of white tablecloths and crystal chandeliers, leaving behind only the ghost of citrus and something harder to name. Something like truth. Renaud waited until the doors swung closed behind her. The dining room was buzzing now, a quiet roar muffled by distance, but still it grated on him. He turned back toward the kitchen, jaw tight, breath shallow. The staff scattered slightly as he walked through them, not with his usual commanding presence, but something else, unsteady, uncertain. He stopped at her station. The cutting board was clean. The knives aligned. The towel folded precisely, still warm from her hands. She came here to humiliate me, he muttered, barely above a whisper. No one replied. He turned sharply to Anna, his eyes flashing. Was that the plan? Some elaborate lesson? You all knew. Anna flinched but stood her ground. No, she said softly. We didn't know. But she didn't humiliate anyone, chef. She cooked. Renaud scoffed and stepped away, running a hand over the back of his neck. The heat of the kitchen pressed against him, though for once he wasn't in control of it. The smell of her dish still hung in the air, orange, clove, memory. He paced. His voice rose. She came into my kitchen. Under a false name. She made my signature dish. And now the committee, they'll remember her, not this place. Not me. A long silence followed. Then another voice, calm, unwavering. She didn't take anything, Anna said. You gave it away the moment you decided to test her instead of trust her. Renaud froze. His hands dropped to his sides. Across the room, a prep cook quietly set down his ladle and pressed his palms together. A gesture of respect. Not loud. Not performative. Just truth. Another cook wiped his eyes, pretending it was just the steam. Then the doors opened again. Maye stood there, shoulders relaxed, eyes gentle. She had not changed. She carried no trophy. No applause followed her back in. But the room shifted. She walked back to her station, unhurried. Renaud met her halfway. Why? He said, voice hoarse. Why come here, of all places? To, what? Teach me a lesson. Maye looked at him for a long moment. Then she said quietly, do you think I came here for you? He blinked. She gestured gently toward the rest of the kitchen. I came here because every kitchen still matters. Because there's always someone in the corner being watched for the wrong reasons. And because someone has to remember that food is not performance. It's provision. Renaud looked down, his shoulders tight. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You have skill, she said. But you cook to impress. Not to nourish. That's why it doesn't last. He opened his mouth to object, but she cut him off, gently. I once made soup from one potato and half a kiss, she said. And my children believed they were royalty. Because I made it with everything I had, and nothing else. Anna blinked fast. One of the junior cooks turned away, wiping his cheek. Maye continued, softer now. You measure your timing with a watch. I measure with hunger. With memory. With the kind of silence that follows a good meal. That's why I don't need a clock to know when duck is done. Renaud stared at her. His face unreadable. Then something shifted, almost invisible, but real. His shoulders loosened. His chin dipped. I may have misunderstood, he said, the words broken and halting. She didn't respond with triumph. Only waited. Renaud hesitated. Then swallowed hard. "Would you," he said, the words like sandpaper, "would you show me the compression technique? I've never seen skin crisp like that without splitting." Maye smiled. Not wide. Not proud. Just real. "Of course," she said. "But it only works if you don't rush it." He nodded slowly. And for the first time, he listened. The kitchen felt different now. Not louder or slower, just fuller. A week had passed since the dish, since the name, since the moment when everything shifted and nothing was said aloud. And yet, the silence had spoken more than any critique or award ever could. At Verita's, the prep hour had always been tight, brittle, the kind of atmosphere where one mistake echoed like thunder. Now, there was laughter. Not constant. Not chaotic. But real. A line cook told a quiet joke while dicing shallots, and no one flinched. A saucier dropped a spoon, and no one was yelled at for it. Even the flames seemed to burn more patiently. Maye stood near the center of it all, surrounded by empty bowls and attentive eyes. Her apron was dusted with flour and citrus peel. She said nothing. The class was called Silent Craft. She had written it on the board with chalk that morning. No speech. No theory. Just hands. She moved through each technique like it was a story. Showing rather than telling. Compressing duck with copper weights. Searing without looking at the clock. Adding a pinch of burnt cinnamon to a sauce base without explanation. Letting the aroma be its own logic. The staff followed her like a flock moving by instinct, watching every gesture, every pause, every breath. Anna stood closest, her hands mirroring Maye's. She wasn't copying. She was learning to feel. That was what Maye had brought back into the kitchen, feeling. Not sentiment. Not drama. Just the right to care about what you made. At the end of the session, the staff stood around her without being told to. No one spoke. Maye set down her towel, gave a single nod, and stepped away from the station. Renaud entered from the back hallway, hands clean, face calm. He walked to the duck resting rack and lifted one of the plated samples. He examined the crisp, the color, the weight. Then he turned to the room. "I've been in this kitchen 7 years," he said. "I've never seen us make this dish right more than once in a row. Today we made it 3 times. Perfectly." The room was quiet. But it was the good kind of quiet. He looked at Maye. There was no tension between them now. Only something like gratitude, though it didn't need to be named. "You were right," he added. "It was never about the duck." Maye smiled. She left the kitchen not long after, not with a speech or a farewell, just a nod to each face she passed. To the dishwasher who had bowed when she first walked in. To the pastry apprentice who now piped lemon mousse with better rhythm. To Anna, who watched her leave with something caught in her throat. On the edge of the prep table, Maye left a folded piece of paper. No envelope. No formality. Just handwriting in ink that dipped slightly at the curves. "Don't cook for stars. Cook for the soul." Anna reached for it. Her fingers paused on the edge before unfolding it. She didn't read it aloud. She didn't need to. The hallway was long and bright. Maye walked through it at the same pace she had walked into Verita's 7 days ago. Steady. Light. Without armor. Someone opened the back door for her, and she stepped out into the sunlight. Anna stood in the doorway, holding the note like it was something more than paper. "She didn't just cook," she said softly, more to herself than anyone else. "She lit constellations." No one corrected her. Inside the kitchen, Renaud picked up the copper weight Maye had used. He ran his fingers across its worn surface, then looked around at his team. Their hands were moving with a kind of reverence now, not from fear but from purpose. He set the weight down. Then, to no one in particular, he said, "Let's do the sauce again." No orders. No shouting. Just an invitation. And in the space she left behind, something new had taken root. Not perfection. Not legacy. Just joy. Quiet, steady, and alive.